You don't belong in this line, sweetie. Economy is back there." Those were the last words the gate agent should have ever said. She thought she was talking to just another passenger. She could bully a black woman in a hoodie trying to board first class. She thought she had the power. She thought she could humiliate her in front of everyone and give her seat away to a wealthy socialite. But what she didn't know, that woman wasn't just a passenger. She was Dr. Evelyn Vance, a senior federal auditor for the FAA, wiretapped and undercover, specifically sent to take this airline down. And by the time this plane lands, nobody is keeping their job. The fluorescent lights of JFK's Terminal 4 hummed with that specific headache-inducing frequency that only frequent flyers seem to notice. For Dr. Evelyn Vance, it was the sound of the office. Evelyn adjusted the strap of her worn canvas duffel bag. She wasn't wearing the navy blue pantsuit she usually donned for hearings on Capitol Hill, nor the crisp white blouse she wore when briefing the Secretary of Transportation. Today she was dressed in a pair of grey joggers, a nondescript oversized hoodie and sneakers that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore no makeup. To the untrained eye, she looked like a tired college student, or perhaps a weary mother traveling home. She certainly didn't look like the woman who held the power to ground entire fleets of aircraft with a single signature. She looked down at her phone. The digital boarding pass for Flight 402 to London Heathrow glowed on the screen. Seat 1A. First class. This wasn't a vacation. This was Operation Blue Sky, a targeted audit authorized by the Department of Transportation following a 300% spike in discrimination complaints against Majestic Airways. The complaints were consistent. Minority passengers holding premium tickets were being bumped due to technical errors, harassed by staff, or denied lounge access. Majestic Airways claimed these were isolated incidents. Evelyn was here to prove they were policy. She approached the entrance to the Diamond Club, Majestic's exclusive first-class lounge. The glass doors were frosted, etched with the airline's Golden Eagle logo. A velvet rope separated the entrance from the chaotic concourse. Standing behind the podium was a woman whose name tag read, Patricia, Senior Concierge. Patricia had stiff blonde hair, sprayed into a helmet of perfection, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was currently chatting animatedly with a tall man in a bespoke suit. "Oh, absolutely, Mr. Henderson," Patricia cooed, handing him his passport. "The champagne is chilled. Please go right in." Mr. Henderson walked past. Evelyn stepped up. Patricia's smile vanished instantly. It was like a shutter slamming down. She didn't look at Evelyn's face. She looked at the hoodie, then the duffel bag, then the sneakers. She let out a short, sharp sigh, barely masking her irritation. "The restrooms are down the hall to the left." "Miss," Patricia said, her attention already drifting to the person behind Evelyn. Evelyn didn't move. "I'm not looking for the restroom. I'm checking into the lounge." Patricia blinked, finally making eye contact. Her expression wasn't one of confusion. It was one of aggressive condescension. "This is the Diamond Club. It's for first class and Diamond Medallion members only. The food court is near Gate B12. "I am aware of what the lounge is," Evelyn said, keeping her voice calm, though her heart rate monitor tucked under her sleeve logged the spike in her pulse. "I'm flying first class." She held out her phone with the QR code visible. Patricia didn't scan it. She didn't even look at the screen. She laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "Sweetie, look, I've been working a double shift and I really don't have time for pranks. You can't just Photoshop a boarding pass and expect to get free champagne. Please step aside so I can help the paying customers." "I paid $8,400 for this ticket," Evelyn said. her voice dropping an octave, becoming steelier. "Scan the code. I'm going to ask you to leave." Patricia snapped her hand, moving toward the phone on her desk. "Or I'm calling security." "Call them," Evelyn challenged. The people in line behind Evelyn began to murmur. "Come on, let's go," someone shouted. "She's holding up the line," another grumbled. Patricia glared at Evelyn, snatched a scanner from the counter, and aggressively aimed it at Evelyn's phone, clearly expecting it to error out. Beep! The machine flashed green. Vance, Evelyn, seat 1A. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia stared at the screen. She hit the refresh button. Green again. She looked at the machine, then at Evelyn, then back at the machine. Her face flushed a mottled red, but she didn't apologize. "Machine must be glitching," Patricia muttered, tossing the scanner down. She didn't open the velvet rope. "We're actually at capacity right now. You'll have to wait at the gate." "I just saw Mr. Henderson walk in," Evelyn noted, "and the couple before him. The lounge isn't full." "I said we are at capacity," Patricia hissed, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Look, I don't know how you got that ticket. Maybe you used a stolen credit card. Maybe it's an employee pass. But people like you ruin the atmosphere for our elite guests. You don't fit the dress code. Now get away from my podium before I have you banned from the flight entirely." Evelyn stared at her. She memorized the time 4:15 p.m. She memorized the name Patricia D. She touched the small button on her duffel bag strap, ensuring the tiny camera lens embedded in the grommet had captured the entire interaction. "I'll see you at the gate, Patricia," Evelyn said softly. "Doubt it," Patricia muttered as Evelyn turned away. Evelyn walked to gate B14, the adrenaline pumping through her system. This was exactly what she needed for the audit, but knowing that didn't make the humiliation sting any less. The assumption of fraud, the dismissal "the people like you," it was textbook. The gate area was crowded. Flight 402 was a flagship route to London filled with business tycoons, celebrities, and tourists. Evelyn found a seat near the podium and opened her laptop. She wasn't checking emails. She was logging into the FAA's secure server via a VPN, uploading the first file of video evidence. File 1. Lounge denial. Discrimination based on appearance. 20 minutes before boarding, a commotion broke out near the desk. A woman in her 50s, draped in a leopard print coat and dragging a Louis Vuitton roller bag, was shouting at the gate agent. The woman had the kind of sharp, angular face that looked like it had been pulled tight by expensive surgeries. This was Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, the wife of a prominent real estate mogul. Evelyn recognized her from the passenger manifest she had reviewed earlier. "It is unacceptable," Mrs. Sterling shrieked. "I need seat 1A. My husband is in 1B. You cannot separate us." The gate agent, a young man named Greg who looked terrified, was typing furiously. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling, but 1A is booked. The passenger has already checked in. I can put you in 1C right across the aisle." "I don't want to cross the aisle. I want to sit next to my husband, who is in 1A. Move them." Greg looked at his screen. "It's Dr. Evelyn Vance." Mrs. Sterling spun around, scanning the waiting area with a look of disgust. "Who is Dr. Vance? Is he here?" Evelyn didn't look up from her laptop, but she was listening. "I can't just move a passenger, ma'am," Greg said weakly. "Of course you can," Mrs. Sterling snapped. "Do you know how much money my husband spends with this airline? We are Diamond Key members. If you don't fix this, I will call your CEO personally. I have his number. Greg swallowed hard. He looked at Patricia, the lounge concierge, who had just arrived at the gate to help with boarding. Patricia whispered something in Greg's ear. She pointed a manicured finger directly at Evelyn, sitting quietly in her hoodie. Mrs. Sterling followed the finger. She looked at Evelyn, and her expression shifted from anger to amusement. That Mrs. Sterling laughed loud enough for half the gate to hear. That is Dr. Vance. You're joking. She looks like the cleaning staff. Patricia leaned over the counter. Greg just checked the ticket status. I think there was a payment irregularity. I flagged it at the lounge. This was a lie. A blatant, verifiable lie. Evelyn's ticket was paid for by the US government. It was the most secure payment method on Earth. Greg typed for a moment. It looks valid here, Patricia. Check again, Patricia said, her voice dropping, carrying a tone of warning. Override it. Use code RSEQ. Security risk. Evelyn's fingers stopped moving on her keyboard. Security risk. That was a nuclear option. It allowed airline staff to deny boarding or downgrade passengers without immediate explanation to preserve the safety of the flight. Greg hesitated. I don't think... Do it, Greg, Mrs. Sterling demanded, slamming her hand on the counter. Look at her. She's probably a drug mule. Who wears a hoodie to London in July? She makes me feel unsafe. If she sits next to my husband, we are getting off this plane and suing. Greg, beaten down and intimidated, sighed. He typed in the code. Click, clack, enter. Evelyn's phone buzzed. A notification from the Majestic Airways app popped up. Seat assignment changed. Old seat 1A, new seat 34E, middle seat, last row, directly next to the lavatories. Evelyn closed her laptop slowly. She stood up. She walked to the podium. Mrs. Sterling smirked, crossing her arms. Problem, sweetie. Evelyn ignored her and looked at Greg. My seat was just changed. Why? Greg couldn't meet her eyes. He looked at his shoes. Yes, ma'am. There was a computer error with the aircraft configuration. We had to reseat some passengers. A computer error, Evelyn repeated. That only affected me, and moved me from first class to the last row of economy. It's an equipment swap, Patricia interjected smoothly, stepping in front of Greg. First class is overbooked. It happens. You've been reaccommodated. You'll receive a travel voucher for $200. $200? Evelyn asked. The price difference is over $7,000. You can take it up with customer service online, Patricia said, waving her hand dismissively. Boarding is starting. Please step aside. You're in the Zone 1 lane. Your ticket is now Zone 5. Mrs. Sterling beamed, slapping her boarding pass on the counter. Finally, some competence. She turned to Evelyn, leaning in close. You should be grateful you're even on the plane, dear. Stick to the back of the bus where you belong. Mrs. Sterling swept past, scanning her ticket. The machine beeped. She breezed down the jet bridge. Evelyn stood there. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, the urge to pull out her badge to flash the gold eagle of the federal government and arrest them both for fraud and violation of Federal Aviation Statutes 49 U.S. Code SAWOR 4127. But she didn't. Not yet. If she stopped them now, it would just be a dispute. A misunderstanding. She needed them to commit. She needed the flight crew to be complicit. She needed the full chain of corruption to reveal itself. Are you going to board, or are you staying? Patricia asked, a smug grin plastered on her face. Evelyn looked at Patricia. She looked at Greg. She looked down the jet bridge. "I'm boarding," Evelyn said. "Zone 5 waits until the end," Patricia barked. "Sit down." Evelyn sat. She waited until every single passenger had boarded. She waited until the gate area was empty. Then she walked down the jet bridge, dragging her duffel bag, walking straight into the trap they had set for her. Little did they know she wasn't trapped. They were. Stepping onto the aircraft was a study in contrasts. To the left lay the sanctuary of first-class wide leather seats that lay flat, the soft clinking of crystal and the scent of warm towels. Evelyn stepped onto the plane. The lead flight attendant, a tall woman with icy blue eyes and a name tag reading Tiffany, Purser, blocked the aisle. She was currently pouring champagne into a flute for Mrs. Sterling, who was already settled comfortably in seat 1A, Evelyn's seat. Mrs. Sterling looked up, glass in hand. She spotted Evelyn and let out a theatrical gasp. "Oh, it's the hoodie girl. Tiffany, keep an eye on your purse." Tiffany turned to Evelyn, her face arranging itself into a mask of professional disdain. "Boarding pass." Evelyn held up her phone. The screen displayed 34E. "Economy," Tiffany said, pointing a manicured finger toward the back of the plane. "All the way back. Keep moving. You're blocking the flow." "I have a carry-on," Evelyn said, gesturing to her duffel. "Since I was downgraded involuntarily, I'd like to place it in the forward closet, so I don't have to fight for bin space in the back." "Closet is for first-class jackets only," Tiffany snapped. "Find space at your assigned seat. If there isn't any, we'll gate-check it to the carousel." Evelyn tightened her grip on the bag. The bag contained her specialized government laptop and the recording equipment. Checking it was not an option. "Fine," Evelyn said. She began the walk. The walk of shame, frequent flyers called it, passing through the comfort of business class, then premium economy, and finally crossing the curtain into the main cabin. The rows got tighter. The air got stuffier. The noise level rose. By the time she reached row 34, the overhead bins were shut tight. Bursting. "Excuse me," Evelyn said to the man in 34D, a large guy who was already asleep, his legs encroaching on her footwell. He grunted and shifted. Evelyn scanned for bin space. Nothing. A young male flight attendant, Marcus, was coming up the aisle closing bins. He looked frazzled. "Miss, you need to take your seat. We're pushing back in 2 minutes." "There's no space for my bag," Evelyn said. "I was moved here last minute." Marcus looked at the bag, then at Evelyn. He seemed to sense her exhaustion. Unlike Patricia and Tiffany, Marcus looked kind. "Here, let me see." He opened a bin over row 32. He rearranged 2 suitcases with surprising strength, creating a small gap. "It'll be a squeeze, but we can make it fit. Hand it here." "Thank you, Marcus," Evelyn said, reading his tag. "No problem. Tough day." "You have no idea," Evelyn whispered. She squeezed into 34E. It was the middle seat. On her left was the sleeping giant. On her right was a teenager playing a video game at max volume without headphones. The seat pitch was 31 inches. Evelyn's knees pressed against the hard plastic of the seat in front of her. The smell of the lavatory behind them was already wafting forward, that distinct mix of blue chemical disinfectant and stale air. As the plane taxied, Evelyn pulled out her phone. She couldn't use her laptop here. There was no room to open it. She began typing notes into her secure app. Observation. Lead FA. Tiffany denied usage of closet space, mandated for downgraded passengers per airline policy section 4.2. Hostility noted. Name tag. Tiffany B. The plane roared down the runway and lifted off. As the G-force pushed her back into the cramped seat, Evelyn closed her eyes. She wasn't sleeping. She was listening. From the front galley, she could hear the faint sound of laughter. The curtain to first class was drawn aggressively shut, but sound travels. "Can you believe she tried to argue?" It was Tiffany's voice. "The nerve!" Mrs. Sterling's shrill voice cut through. "I told my husband if she stays in 1A, I'm walking off. I don't care if we lose the fare. It's about standards." "Don't worry, Mrs. Sterling." Tiffany laughed. "We put her in the penalty box. Row 34 is right by the toilets. She won't be bothering anyone." Evelyn opened her eyes. The recording app on her phone was running. The audio was faint, but the directional microphone in her earbuds was picking it up. They called it the penalty box. This wasn't just a downgrade. It was punishment. 2 hours into the flight, the service cart finally reached row 34. They had run out of the chicken option. They had run out of the pasta. "We have pretzels," Marcus said apologetically. "And I think there's 1 cheese box left." "I'll take the cheese box," Evelyn said. She was starving. "That'll be $12, Marcus said. "I paid for a first-class meal," Evelyn said quietly. "It's included in my ticket fare." Marcus looked at his handheld device. Your ticket shows economy basic. It says no meal included." "I'm sorry, miss. The system won't let me give it to you for free. I'd have to swipe a card." Evelyn stared at him. Patricia hadn't just changed her seat. She had changed the fare class code in the system. She had altered the digital record to make it look like Evelyn had bought a cheap restrictive ticket. This was wire fraud. "It's okay, Marcus," Evelyn said, handing him her personal credit card. "Charge it." Marcus swiped it. "I'll bring you an extra water on the sly," he whispered. "Don't tell Tiffany." Evelyn ate the stale crackers and processed cheese. She needed to use the restroom. She stood up, squeezing past the sleeping man. She waited by the lavatory door. The rear galley was empty, or so she thought. But as she stood there, stretching her legs, she saw Tiffany back in the galley, huddled with the other flight attendant referencing a clipboard. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. That was the load manifest. The load manifest is a critical document. It tells the pilots exactly how much the plane weighs and where the passengers are sitting. This data determines the center of gravity, the takeoff speed, and fuel burn. "Just leave it," Tiffany was saying. "The captain doesn't need to know we swapped the seats." "But Tiffany," the other attendant said. "Mrs. Sterling and her husband are heavy. The passenger we moved to the back is, well, she's light. Plus, we moved 3 other people to accommodate the Sterling's entourage. The weight distribution is off. We're supposed to update the pilot." "If we update the pilot, we have to file an incident report explaining why we moved passengers after the door closed," Tiffany hissed. "And I am not filling out paperwork because Patricia decided to do a favor for a VIP. The plane is flying fine. Just sign it." Evelyn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cabin temperature. This was a Title 14 CFR violation, falsifying weight and balance data. It wasn't just rude, it was dangerous. If they hit turbulence or had to make an emergency landing, the computer's calculations would be wrong. Evelyn stepped into the galley. Tiffany jumped, hiding the clipboard behind her back. What are you doing back here? The seatbelt sign is on." "The sign is off," Evelyn corrected her. "And I couldn't help but overhear. You need to update the captain on the load sheet." Tiffany's eyes went wide, then narrowed into slits. "Excuse me. Are you eavesdropping on crew communications? I'm telling you that weight and balance is a safety issue." Evelyn said, her voice firm. You moved Mrs. Sterling and her husband combined weight, likely 400 pounds to the nose. You moved me and 2 others to the tail. That's a significant moment-arm shift. Tell the captain. Tiffany stepped forward, invading Evelyn's personal space. She was tall, looming over Evelyn. Listen to me, economy, Tiffany sneered. I have been flying for 15 years. I don't need a lecture from a hoodie-wearing, cheap-seat passenger who thinks she knows how planes work because she watched a documentary once. You are interfering with a flight crew member. Do you know what happens when you do that? I know exactly what happens, Evelyn said. I can have the authorities waiting for you in London, Tiffany threatened. I can have you zip-tied to your seat for the next 5 hours. Now get back in 34E. Sit down and shut up. If I see you out of your seat again, you're going in restraints. Evelyn looked at Tiffany. She looked at the terrified junior flight attendant. She realized something. Tiffany wasn't just mean. She was incompetent. And she was scared. She knew she had broken the rules for Mrs. Sterling, and now she was doubling down to cover her tracks. I'll sit, Evelyn said calmly. But you should really log that change. Go! Tiffany shouted, pointing at the seat. Heads turned in the back rows. People were watching. A woman in 33C pulled out her phone and started filming Evelyn being yelled at. Evelyn returned to her seat. She sat down. Her heart was pounding not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of what she had just witnessed. She reached into her duffel bag, which she had managed to wedge under the seat in front of her. She pulled out a small black notebook. She wasn't just recording audio anymore. It was time to prepare the official notice of violation. But she couldn't serve it yet. She needed the final piece of the puzzle. She needed the captain's reaction. Suddenly the plane lurched. Hard. The seatbelt sign pinged on instantly. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We've hit some unexpected clear air turbulence. Flight attendants, take your seats immediately. The plane dropped. Passengers screamed. Because the weight distribution was reported incorrectly, the autopilot's compensation for the turbulence was slightly off. The nose pitched up too aggressively, then slammed down. In row 34, it felt like a roller coaster. In row 1, however, it was chaos. A few minutes later, once the air smoothed out, the intercom clicked on. It was Tiffany's voice, shaking slightly. Is there a doctor on board? We have a medical situation in first class. Evelyn unbuckled her belt. She wasn't a medical doctor. She was a PhD, but she was trained in first aid, and more importantly, she knew exactly what was happening. She stood up. Sit down, the man next to her yelled. Are you crazy? Evelyn ignored him. She walked up the aisle. She walked past the terrified junior flight attendants. She walked through the curtain into business and then into first class. The scene was a disaster. Champagne was spilled everywhere. Mrs. Sterling was on the floor. She wasn't having a heart attack. She had been standing up, bragging to her husband when the turbulence hit, because she wasn't strapped in, and because the plane's pitch was violent due to the balance error she had been thrown into the bulkhead. She was holding her arm, wailing. My wrist. My wrist. Tiffany was kneeling beside her, looking pale. I don't have the first aid kit, keys, Tiffany stammered. They're in the cockpit. Move, Evelyn said. Tiffany looked up. You again, I told you. I said move, Evelyn commanded. The authority in her voice was absolute. It wasn't the voice of a passenger. It was the voice of the federal government. Evelyn knelt beside Mrs. Sterling. She checked the arm. It's a fracture. She needs a splint. Evelyn looked at Tiffany. Go tell the captain that a passenger is injured because the aircraft pitch was unstable, And while you're in there, Tiffany, tell him the actual weight distribution, so he can land this plane safely without killing us all." Tiffany froze. I can't." "Tell him," Evelyn said, standing up and locking eyes with the purser. "Or I will go in there and tell him myself. And if I have to enter that cockpit, Tiffany, you will never set foot on an airplane again." Tiffany scrambled up and ran toward the cockpit door. Mrs. Sterling looked up at Evelyn, tears streaming down her face, mascara running. The arrogance was gone, replaced by pain and confusion. "You," Mrs. Sterling gasped, "you're the girl from the line." "I am," Evelyn said, grabbing a linen napkin and a magazine to fashion a temporary splint. "Hold still. This is going to hurt." As she bound the wrist, Evelyn leaned in close. "By the way, Mrs. Sterling, that turbulence, it felt so bad, because the plane was unbalanced. Because you stole my seat." Mrs. Sterling's eyes went wide. "Karma," Evelyn whispered, "has a very fast response time." The remaining 4 hours of Flight 402 were the longest of Tiffany's life. Evelyn finished securing the splint on Mrs. Sterling's wrist, using a rolled-up Vogue magazine and a linen napkin. The first-class cabin, usually a sanctuary of clinking glasses and polite conversation, was dead silent. The other passengers in the cabin, titans of industry, a famous actor, a tech billionaire, stared openly. They had witnessed the crash, the screaming and the calm efficiency of the woman in the hoodie who had stepped up when the crew froze. Mrs. Sterling, pale and sweating from pain, looked at Evelyn with a mixture of terror and bewilderment. The painkillers Tiffany had finally managed to locate were starting to kick in, dulling her sharp tongue. "You should sit down," Mrs. Sterling mumbled, gesturing weakly with her good hand to the empty seat next to her husband, seat 1B. Mr. Sterling, a man who looked like he hadn't faced a consequence since the 1980s, was staring at his shoes, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. "Thank you," Evelyn said. She didn't return to row 34. She sat down in seat 1B, right across the aisle from her original champagne-soaked seat of 1A. Tiffany emerged from the cockpit. She looked like she had just gone 15 rounds with a prize fighter. Her perfect helmet of blonde hair was frayed, and her makeup was smudged. The captain had not taken the news well. When Tiffany confessed that the weight and balance sheet was off by nearly 1,000 pounds and shifted significantly forward, because they had swapped a 130-pound woman for a 400-pound couple plus luggage, he had gone ballistic. He realized that the terrifying pitch-up during the turbulence wasn't just bad air. It was a compounded pilot error caused by bad data. They could have stalled the aircraft. Tiffany walked into the cabin. She saw Evelyn sitting in first class. Old habits die hard. Tiffany marched over her voice, shaking with residual adrenaline and rage. "You back to your seat, now! You do not have a first-class ticket. You are trespassing in this cabin." Evelyn didn't even look up from her phone, where she was finalizing a time-stamped log entry. "I'm monitoring the patient, Tiffany. Unless you're qualified to manage a compound fracture, I am the purser on this aircraft," Tiffany hissed, aware that the high-value passengers around them were listening to every word. "You are a disruptive passenger in Economy Basic. Move or I will have authorities meet the plane." Evelyn slowly raised her head. Her eyes were calm, dark pools that seemed to see right through Tiffany's uniform to the terrified bully underneath. "The authorities are already meeting the plane, Tiffany," Evelyn said softly. "The captain radioed ahead for paramedics for Mrs. Sterling, and I imagine he also radioed dispatch about the weight and balance discrepancy. You know, the one that is a federal crime to conceal." Tiffany paled. We fixed the paperwork. You can't fix a digital trail, Evelyn said, returning to her phone. By the way, can I get a sparkling water? No ice. Tiffany stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. The tech billionaire in row 3 chuckled audibly. Defeated Tiffany turned on her heel and walked to the galley. A moment later, she returned with a glass of sparkling water, no ice, and set it down on Evelyn's tray table with a trembling hand. Thank you, Evelyn said. For the rest of the flight, the dynamic on the plane had completely inverted. The cabin crew avoided the front galley. They whispered nervously in the back. Mrs. Sterling dozed intermittently, moaning in pain. Mr. Sterling stared out the window. Evelyn sat in the seat she should have had all along, sipping her water, her hoodie looking starkly out of place amidst the Italian leather and cashmere blankets. She wasn't sleeping. She was preparing. She was reviewing 14 CFR Part 121, Operating Requirements, Domestic Flag, and Supplemental Operations. She was mentally drafting the subpoenas for the gate security footage at JFK. She was listing the names on the warrants. The plane began its descent towards London Heathrow. The mood in the cabin was thick with apprehension. The wealthy passengers knew they had witnessed something bizarre, something that would be talked about at dinner parties for months. Tiffany knew her career was hanging by a thread. Mrs. Sterling knew her wrist was broken. Only Evelyn knew that they were all about to walk into a buzzsaw. The wheels touched down on the tarmac with a jolt. Reverse thrusters roared. As the plane taxied to the gate, the captain's voice came over the intercom, sounding grim. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London. We ask that everyone remain seated with seatbelts fastened. Authorities will be boarding the aircraft to assist with a medical situation and an operational matter. Please leave the aisle clear. An operational matter. In row 34, Marcus, the kind flight attendant, closed his eyes and prayed. In the forward galley, Tiffany applied a fresh layer of lipstick, as if it were armor. In seat 1B, Evelyn Vance closed her phone, picked up her canvas duffel bag, and stood up before the seatbelt sign went off. Sit down, Tiffany barked automatically from her jump seat. Evelyn ignored her. She stood in the aisle, facing the cabin door, waiting for it to open. The aircraft door disarmed with a loud clunk and slowly swung open. The cool, damp air of London rushed in. Standing on the jet bridge were not just 2 paramedics. There were 4 officers from the Metropolitan Police. Behind them stood 3 severe-looking men in suits, Majestic Airways London station manager and 2 corporate fixers. And behind them, looking incredibly annoyed at having been summoned from her layover hotel, was Patricia, the lounge concierge from JFK, who had flown in on an earlier flight. The lead paramedic boarded first, heading straight for Mrs. Sterling. The station manager, a man named Mr. Albright with a perpetually pinched expression, stepped aboard next. He looked at Tiffany. "Report," he demanded. The captain's message was garbled, something about turbulence and a load sheet error and a passenger injury. Tiffany immediately went into damage control mode. She stepped over the threshold, blocking the aisle, pointing back into the cabin. "Mr. Albright, it was chaos." Tiffany lied breathlessly. "We hit clear air, unexpected turbulence. This passenger, Mrs. Sterling, stood up against crew instructions and fell. And then?" She scanned the cabin and pointed a shaking finger at Evelyn, who was standing quietly near the cockpit door. "Then that woman, the one in the hoodie, she came rushing up from economy. She's been disruptive since JFK. She pushed past me, interfered with medical care, and refused to return to her seat. She's caused a massive scene. I want her detained for interfering with a flight crew." Patricia, standing in the jet bridge, craned her neck and saw Evelyn. "Oh, her again. I told you she's trouble. Tried to sneak into the Diamond Lounge with a fake boarding pass. Probably drunk. Mr. Albright looked at Evelyn with disdain. Another problem passenger. Another delay. Mr. Albright said sharply to Evelyn, "Step off the aircraft immediately into the custody of the police. You are under arrest for violating aviation bylaws and interfering with the duties of a flight crew." One of the police officers stepped forward, reaching for his cuffs. "This way, madam. Don't make it difficult." Mrs. Sterling, now being helped onto a stretcher by paramedics, groaned. "Get her out of here. She hurt my wrist worse with that magazine." Another lie. The entire first-class cabin was watching. This was the moment the system was designed for, to crush the person wearing the hoodie and protect the people wearing the diamonds. Evelyn didn't move toward the police. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't resist. She simply reached into the front pocket of her worn canvas duffel bag. "Before you do that, officer," Evelyn said, her voice clear, calm, and carrying an authority that instantly silenced the jet bridge. "I need you to look at something." She pulled out a black leather wallet. She flipped it open. Inside wasn't a driver's license. It wasn't a credit card. It was a heavy gold shield with the Great Seal of the United States engraved on it. Next to it was a photo ID bearing the heading United States of America, Department of Transportation Office of the Inspector General. Below the photo were the words, Special Agent, Federal Auditor, Dr. Evelyn Vance. The silence that fell over the plane was absolute. You could hear the blood rushing in Tiffany's ears. Mr. Albright stared at the badge. He looked at the hoodie. He looked back at the badge. His face turned the color of ashes. The police officer stopped dead in his tracks. He pulled his hand back from the cuffs as if they were red hot. "Did you say, Federal Auditor, ma'am?" "Dr. Vance will do," Evelyn said coldly. She stepped past Tiffany, who was currently gripping the bulkhead for support, looking like she might faint. Evelyn stood in the doorway, looking down at the assembly of airline management and staff. "I am Special Agent Dr. Evelyn Vance, Aviation Fraud and Safety Division," she announced. Her voice was ice. "This entire flight, from the moment I stepped into Terminal 4 at JFK, has been an active federal investigation into Majestic Airways' operational practices." She turned her gaze to Patricia, who was trying to shrink behind a police officer. "Patricia Davis," Evelyn said, reciting the name from memory. "You are on record denying a valid first-class ticket holder access to a lounge based on visual profiling and subsequently committing wire fraud by illegally accessing the reservation system to alter a federal government ticket from Fare Class F to Economy Basic without cause. That's a felony." Patricia let out a squeak of terror. Evelyn turned to Tiffany. "Tiffany Jenkins Purser, you are on record for enforcing a fraudulent downgrade. More importantly, you are on record conspiring to falsify a federally mandated load manifest to cover up an unauthorized seating change, directly contributing to an in-flight safety incident that resulted in serious injury. You also threatened a federal agent in the performance of her duties." Tiffany slumped against the wall, tears streaming down her face, ruining the makeup armor. Evelyn turned to Mrs. Sterling, who was on the stretcher, mouth agape. "Mrs. Sterling, you conspired to defraud the airline and displace a ticketed passenger. While not a felony for you, I imagine the civil suits from the other passengers whose lives you endangered by unbalancing the plane will be significant. Enjoy the NHS hospital." Finally, Evelyn looked at Mr. Albright, the station manager. "Mr. Albright, this aircraft is now a federal crime scene under the jurisdiction of the United States Department of Transportation and the FAA. No one leaves this jet bridge. No luggage is to be unloaded. She pulled a stack of folded papers from her back pocket. Subpoenas, already prepared. I want the cockpit voice recorder pulled immediately. I want the digital flight data recorder. I want the original unaltered passenger manifest and the falsified load sheet signed by Tiffany Jenkins. And I want the personal cell phones of Patricia Davis and Tiffany Jenkins, as I have probable cause to believe they contain evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. She handed the stack to the stunned police officer. Officer, take these people into custody. I have a lot of paperwork to file. Evelyn Vance, the woman in the hoodie, slung her duffel bag over her shoulder. She looked at the wreckage of careers and egos she had left in her wake. Karma, she murmured to herself as she walked up the jet bridge, has arrived. The descent of silence that fell over Gate 24 at Heathrow wasn't just quiet. It was the sound of a vacuum sealing shut. As Dr. Evelyn Vance stood at the top of the jet bridge watching the Metropolitan Police escort the bewildered VIPs off the aircraft, the reality of the situation began to set in for everyone else. The passengers in first class, usually the ones demanding expedited service, sat frozen. They knew that what they had just witnessed wasn't a standard customer service dispute. It was an execution. The immediate aftermath. For Tiffany Jenkins and Patricia Davis, the humiliation was absolute. They weren't just asked to leave, they were processed. Because the incident involved a falsified federal load manifest and an in-flight injury on an international route jurisdiction, was a nightmare of overlapping agencies. Patricia was led into a holding room within the terminal usually reserved for suspected smugglers. The woman who had sneered at Evelyn's hoodie 2 hours prior was now stripped of her company scarf and blazer, sitting in a cold, fluorescent-lit room, shivering in her blouse. Mr. Albright, the station manager who had threatened to arrest Evelyn, was frantically on the phone in the hallway. "I didn't know," he was screaming at someone in Chicago. "She had a badge. Mike, a federal badge. She's seizing the aircraft. No, I can't just smooth it over. She has the flight data recorder." Evelyn remained on the plane for another hour. She wasn't celebrating. She was working. She supervised the download of the aircraft's digital logs. She secured the affidavits from the pilots, who were all too eager to throw their cabin crew under the bus to save their own licenses. By the time Evelyn walked off the plane, she carried a hard drive containing the career-ending evidence for 6 people. The investigation operation Blue Sky. The media storm that followed was unprecedented. The headline on the New York Times read, "Turbulence ahead, FAA sting exposes systemic bias and safety violations at Majestic Airways." The investigation didn't just look at Flight 402. Evelyn's team cracked open the airline's internal servers. They found the chat logs between gate agents. They found a secret code system used by staff, POT, person of trouble used for minority passengers, and HVC, high-value client, used to justify bumping paying customers for friends of the staff. It was a PR bloodbath. Majestic Airways stock plummeted 18% in 3 days. Patricia's interrogation. 2 weeks later, Patricia Davis sat across from federal investigators in a cramped office in New York. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, clawing need for self-preservation. "I was just doing what I was told," Patricia stammered, wringing her hands. "The regional manager, Mr. Henderson, he told us that if a Diamond Key member wants a seat, they get the seat. He said, make it happen, or I'll find someone who can." "So you admit to altering the federal flight record?" the investigator asked, tapping a thick file. "We have the keystroke logs, Patricia. You didn't just move Dr. Vance. You changed her ticket status to non-revenue employee to hide the fact that she paid full fare. That is wire fraud." "I didn't keep the money," she cried. No, but you stole the service, the agent replied. And you did it based on a visual profile. You looked at a black woman in a hoodie and decided she didn't belong. That decision is going to cost you. Patricia cut a deal. To avoid a felony prison sentence, she pleaded guilty to unauthorized access to a protected computer system. She was fined $50,000, bankrupting her savings, and was placed on a federal do-not-hire list for any position involving transportation security or data handling. The Queen of the Lounge was now unemployable in the only industry she knew. She ended up working the night shift at a toll booth on the New Jersey Turnpike, miles away from the glamour of first class. The end of Tiffany Jenkins. Tiffany's fall was harder and faster. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, does not bargain. At her hearing, the audio from the cockpit was played. The room was silent as the tape rolled. The pilot's panic was audible as the nose of the plane pitched up violently. Then the recording shifted to Tiffany entering the cockpit after the incident. Pilot. Why is the trim wheel fighting me? Who is in 1A? Tiffany on tape. It's Mrs. Sterling. We moved the Vance passenger to the back. Pilot, you put 400 pounds in the nose and took 130 out of the tail and didn't tell me. We could have stalled on approach. Write it up. Tiffany, Captain. Please, the paperwork is a nightmare. Can't we just say it was wind shear? The room gasped. That was the nail in the coffin. Tiffany didn't just lose her job. She was stripped of her FAA, Flight Attendant Certificate of Demonstrated Proficiency. It was revoked with prejudice, meaning she could never reapply. She was charged criminally with reckless endangerment of an aircraft. She served 8 months in a minimum security federal camp. When she got out, the internet had made her famous in the worst way possible. Memes of her face with the caption, "Can't we just say it was wind shear?" followed her everywhere. She eventually moved back to her hometown in rural Ohio, working in a warehouse where no one cared about her makeup or her power trips. The socialite's exile misses. Eleanor Sterling discovered that there are punishments worse than prison for a socialite irrelevance. Evelyn's report was public record. The details of Mrs. Sterling demanding the seat her hysterical behavior and her callous disregard for the safety of others were fodder for the tabloids. The other passengers on Flight 402, wealthy, powerful individuals who had feared for their lives during that turbulence, turned on her. A class-action lawsuit was filed against Majestic Airways, but the lawyers shrewdly named Mrs. Sterling as a third-party defendant for tortious interference. She wasn't arrested, but she was excommunicated. Her husband, terrified of the bad press affecting his real estate empire, filed for divorce 3 months after the flight. He cited irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew he was cutting a liability loose. The final blow came when she tried to fly to Art Basel in Miami later that year. She walked up to the check-in counter of a different airline, clad in her furs, expecting the usual fawning treatment. The agent typed in her name and stopped. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling. You've been placed on the consolidated no-fly list pending the outcome of the Majestic Airways safety investigation. You are barred from commercial air travel." "For how long?" she shrieked. "Indefinitely," the agent said, looking past her to the next person in line. Next? Mrs. Sterling was grounded, trapped in a world she deemed herself too good for, unable to escape nursing a wrist that clicked painfully every time it rained, a permanent reminder of the seat that wasn't hers. The reward for integrity. 6 months later, the dust was settling. Majestic Airways had signed a consent decree with the Department of Transportation agreeing to pay a $25 million fine and overhaul their entire management structure. In the Chicago headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. Layoffs were happening in middle management. The people who had encouraged the toxic culture were being purged. Marcus, the young flight attendant who had helped Evelyn with her bag, sat in the waiting room outside the CEO's office. He was shaking. He assumed this was it. He had been on the flight. He was guilty by association. The door opened. "Marcus, come in." He walked in. Seated behind the desk was the new CEO, a woman known for turning around failing companies. And sitting on the sofa sipping coffee was Dr. Evelyn Vance. She looked different, softer. She wore a simple blouse and slacks. "Dr. Vance," Marcus breathed. I just want to say I didn't know about the weight sheet. I swear." "We know, Marcus," Evelyn said, her voice warm. "I reviewed the cabin logs. You were the only crew member who logged the seat change correctly in your personal device, even though Tiffany told you not to. You also bought a passenger a meal out of your own pocket when the system failed," and the new CEO clasped her hands. "Majestic Airways is trying to rebuild its soul, Marcus. We realized we have plenty of people who know how to pour coffee, but very few who know how to be human beings. We are creating a new role," Evelyn explained. "Director of Passenger Advocacy. It's a management position. You wouldn't be flying anymore. You would be training crews on conflict resolution, bias training, and ethical standards. You'd report directly to the board, bypassing the middle managers who caused this mess. The starting salary is triple what you're making now," the CEO added. Marcus was stunned. He looked from the CEO to Evelyn. "Why me?" "Because," Evelyn smiled, remembering the moment in the cramped economy row, "when I was nobody you treated me like somebody. That's the only qualification that matters." The conclusion: Dr. Evelyn Vance stood outside the terminal at Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C., watching a plane take off into the twilight. Her phone buzzed. It was a notification from her office. Case file Majestic Airways, closed. Status successful audit. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. It was the same worn canvas duffel. She could have afforded a Rimowa suitcase or a Louis Vuitton carry-on, but she kept the cheap bag. It was a litmus test. It was a filter. It showed her who people really were before they knew who she was. She hailed a cab. The driver, an older man, jumped out to help her with the bag. "Let me get that for you, ma'am," he said kindly. "Looks heavy." "It is," Evelyn said, looking back at the airport one last time. "It carries a lot of weight." As the cab pulled away, merging into the traffic of the capital, Evelyn Vance allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The skies were a little friendlier today, the lines a little fairer. The bullies had been scattered, and the good guys had won. She closed her eyes, ready for the next mission. Somewhere out there, another airline was cutting corners, another manager was profiling passengers, and another gate agent was letting the power go to their head. And sooner or later, they would see a woman in a hoodie standing in line, waiting for them to make a mistake. Karma, after all, is the only flight that is never delayed. And that is the story of how one arrogant mistake cost an airline millions and ruined 3 careers. It's a powerful reminder that you never, ever judge someone by how they look. You don't know who they are, you don't know what power they hold, and you definitely don't know if they're recording you for a federal investigation. The world is full of Patricia's and Tiffany's people who think a little bit of power gives them the right to bully others. But thankfully, The world also has people like Dr. Evelyn Vance. If you enjoyed this story of massive instant karma, please destroy that like button. It helps the channel so much. And if you want more stories about undercover justice and entitled people getting exactly what they deserve, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. I want to know. Have you ever been judged or mistreated by staff at an airport? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching. Stay humble, and I'll see you in the next video.